Welcome. I'm Kinetic Symphony. I hunt down and report on mysterious and weird, true stories, from glitches to the paranormal. Case file number 688, written by Nick, crashing into another universe. This story is very bizarre, and I'm not going to give you the backstory of how I ended up in the situation I was in, because it was a very traumatic experience. Anyways, I ended up jumping out of a vehicle and running as fast as I could to get away from someone. I ran to the first car I saw and it had the keys in it. Let me just say, I don't steal other people's cars other than for the reason of the ordeal I was going through. This was an emergency. I drove erratically to hopefully get someone to call the police so I could get pulled over and receive help because the person I was running from was directly behind me. Once the police finally got behind me, I went to pull over, but something happened with the steering wheel and I went off into a ditch that was extremely deep, crashing the car. All I remember was being sat on by some police officer and being so scared for my life that I couldn't speak. I was in shock. They didn't ask what I was doing or even why I stole the car to begin with, so I stayed quiet and I went to jail. After I got bonded, I went home and started noticing everything was off. Nothing was the same anymore. My mother and brother, who I was having issues with, are different now. They treat me so well. For example, my brother would cuss me out and talk down to me all the time. He never told me he loved me. All of a sudden I would say, "I love you, brother." And he would reply, "I love you too, sister, good night." Or, "I love you, be safe." For example, I asked him if I could borrow $20. He said, "For what?" I said, "Because I really like to read and I'm out of coins." He said, "Alright, but I need it back." I was in shock because he used to be so greedy and I'm used to him saying something nasty like, "Go sell yourself if you want it that bad." Not anymore. He doesn't do that anymore. My mother is being the mother she never was before. It's like I have a different, more loving brother and mother. Things also changed with my dad. We aren't close anymore. He was my everything, but not anymore. I started noticing things were different in movies I watched. So for months and months, I kept putting in keywords of what I was experiencing, and the Mandela effect came up. I jumped with joy when I saw that millions of people are going through what I'm going through, because I almost committed myself into a psychiatric ward over this. I think I died the day I crashed my car and shifted into this reality. Let me say that I was not on drugs, but had experienced a traumatic experience with someone who wouldn't let me leave his side, and that's why I jumped out of the first vehicle and stole the car to begin with. One more thing. If your life is in danger, do whatever it takes to survive your attacker, even if it means stealing a car. I did my year in county jail, and I'd do it again if I had to, because at least I survived. Case notes for file 688. Crashing into another universe. So I would agree that it's very probable that you did actually die in the crash, going at high speed into a ditch. Maybe the airbags didn't deploy for some reason, or maybe just the shock of it created a hemorrhage in your brain. And those are just two ways that I'm thinking off the top of my head. Said before, but the human body is very fragile. There's like 61 million people that die every single year worldwide. That's a staggering number. You'd think it'd be a lot less than that, but that's a lot of people. Of course, tons of people being born, so the net is still positive, but that's so many people dying. It's truly wild. Although there is a possible mundane explanation, in that maybe just being in that crash and then having a traumatic event, but also going to prison or jail, maybe it changed the mindset of your brother and mother. Maybe it made them more welcoming of you and cherishing the moments they have, and maybe trying to just be nicer to you, to give you a better life experience. Not sure why your dad would pull away in this case, and it wouldn't explain why you don't remember movie details the way they are now. I was rewatching Total Recall recently, the original. The remake is okay, but it doesn't compare to the original. There's a vibe there that cannot be replicated. A certain je ne sais quoi, the magic. It's a reflection on how memory can be falsified and how fickle it can be. Obviously, we don't have machines that can alter it directly, not in that way, not that we know of anyways. There's also an episode of Stargate SG-1 where this happens to Colonel Mitchell, in that he's on an alien world and they have this device where they can implant or remove memories from, and very specific ones too. Like they craft a scene, like you would a movie, and then implant it in. It could be a fake memory, could be real memories too. It's an appealing technology if you could train people to be fighter pilots or doctors or whatever in a few hours instead of years. That's a huge benefit, obviously. Just transport their memories, not just knowledge, but their very experience of these people. That's tremendously powerful. But the same applies if it's a false memory that's implanted in a way that is shocking and traumatic, like killing someone, which is what happened to Colonel Mitchell. But the entire time, even knowing it wasn't a real memory, it's hard not to believe it. It's hard to doubt your own mind. To lose faith in your own mind, that'd be the easiest way to go crazy. But in your case, I don't think that's what happened. I do think the most probable answer is you died and quantum immortality, whoop, zapped you away, and now you're in a different, slightly altered universe. But it's always good to consider mundane possibilities, because not everything is going to be an actual glitch. Hard to say sometimes, but this one's pretty clear-cut. And I'm happy for you that you reconnected with your brother and mother. Family's important. I hope you can remedy whatever it is that's off with your dad now. Reconnect there too. Bring the whole family back together. That would be great. Bonus file, written by October Mindset. An afterlife spent in the kitchen. I was working a part-time job at a church at the time, and it was at the end of the day, so I was cleaning up and getting ready to lock up for the day. For context, this church is very old. There are graves on the property from the 1860s, and the place has burned down twice. I go to the church's kitchen to grab my lunch bag from the fridge, and when I walk through the door, in the corner of my eye, I see a woman at the counter to my right. I thought it was my boss, but the fridge was straight ahead, so I walked forward and grabbed my stuff. I turned around and there was no one there now. I was alone in the kitchen, and the door did not open, but there was someone there. I made a conscious effort not to look because I'm kinda socially awkward. I thought about it and realized that the woman was wearing a white dress with a pink floral pattern on it. How on earth could that be my boss, who only wears jeans and sweaters? Freaked out, I went outside and locked up the church and told my friend about it, who's been going to the church for a long time. He told me that people joke about it being haunted, but there's no way you saw a ghost in broad daylight like that. It's a light playing tricks on your eyes. After my job was done, I forgot about the interaction until I got a text from my friend. He said, "Bro, was that woman you saw working at the counter wearing a white dress with a pink floral pattern?" I never described the ghost to him before, so we both saw the same woman in the kitchen, cooking. Our theory is that back in the day, the woman would do all the work in the kitchen for church services. She must have been buried in the church grounds and she was stuck there working in the kitchen for decades or even a century. Creepy file number 33, written by AnOldTruthTeller. By the way, this isn't my laptop. I was on a plane once and noticed that although people were still boarding, there were a large number of seats around me unoccupied. The last people on, though, were all together and consisted of one large family traveling together. There were 4 adults and about 10 children, ranging from toddler age to high school and young adult. They had the usual look of a large group traveling with children, some of whom were shy and withdrawn, others who were running around, and the adults looking frazzled, trying to keep everyone and everything together. When they'd all been seated, there seemed to be some issue with the seating, as one member of their party was supposed to sit several rows back. The flight attendant apologized and said that it happens, that sometimes their computer will shuffle sequential seating, etc., but assured them that there was seating available for everyone. The family sat down, -1, and started with the usual, "That's a shame, wish they could sit up here," talk. Since it seemed that their party was surrounding me, I stopped the flight attendant and asked her if I could switch seats with another passenger. This caught the attention of the large group, perhaps anticipating a complaint, but the flight attendant told me no, they don't usually do that, and that everyone has been seated already, but asked if there was a problem with where I was sitting. I explained to her that I was traveling solo and did not care where I sat, and asked if I could give my seat to the member of the family who was absent, as my seat would have been put in the midst of the group anyways. The family overheard and was thanking me as I retrieved my bag overhead and followed the flight attendant to the family member's seat. She explained what was happening, and I noticed that the family member, a young girl maybe 12 years old, seemed in a hurry to get back to her family and thanked me 4 times. She practically ran up the aisle, and before I could sit down, the man who'd been sitting next to her was literally staring with his mouth open and asked, "What's the problem?" No, that girl was sitting here first. Red flag number 1. And the flight attendant explained to him what was happening, and he immediately looked at me and said, "No, I don't want to sit next to him. Where's that girl going?" She explained to him that there was no issue and she couldn't do anything else now. I think she was getting the same vibe as me. Now, I want to assure everyone that I'm not in the habit of judging people by their appearance, but this guy was the definition of red flags. He was overweight and paunchy, that overweight with no muscle tone look that some people have. Half bald with a few strands combed over, thick glasses and no chin. He was a mouth breather and kept his mouth open constantly, drooling on himself and then sucking it back in between heavy breathing. If there was a textbook example of a creep, it would be him. As I was putting my bag overhead, he started talking to himself under his breath about how this was BS, just my luck, wasn't bothering anybody, and why did they move that girl? I wanted to say something to him but didn't. It wasn't long before my neighbor got a call and was talking about an upcoming court appearance, and I overheard, "No victim's testimony," and "rarely show up," and people wouldn't ask me to babysit if I was like that. The only time I said anything to him was when he started blatantly watching porn on his laptop with earphones in, grunting, sweating, wheezing, and kept repeating, "Little bitch," when a part was on that he evidently liked. Then took a blanket and covered his lap, with hands fidgeting underneath. As soon as I saw that he intended on keeping them there, I pretended to reach for the call button. Then he jerked his hands out and started muttering under his breath about me minding my own business. At some point, I got up to use the restroom, and when I returned, he was on his phone again, and I caught something about the butt on her. No. Switched seats on me. Got away, and he shut up as he saw me approaching. The creep went on to sleep eventually, and fortunately stayed asleep for the rest of the flight. When we were all deboarding, a woman I presume was the mother was standing with the girl and said, "Thank you again." I shuddered to think how he acted in the short time she was next to him, or what he would have done had she remained there. Shocking absolutely no one, including himself, he was met at the gate by security and police. As he was being led away, he said, "This isn't my laptop, by the way."